Don't let wellness day be a tick box exercise. Because normally it's, well, we're having a wellness day, come do whatever and carry on.
Yeah, check your blood pressure.
Exactly.
And that's it.
But creating those continuous conversations around it, whether it's partnering with institutions to come in and give talks around, financial awareness, financial budgeting, what it is like to actually do a budget. Some people don't know how to do a budget.
Welcome to another episode of Earnings Unleashed. My name is Andisa Liba and I'm going to be your host for today. The goal of our podcast is to gather business leaders around South Africa to talk all things employee wellness. How do we amplify our efforts and strategies to create a more cohesive workplace? Today with me in studio, I've got Kyle Chetty, who is the head of people at Planet 42. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Wonderful. Kyle, perhaps for the benefit of our audience, won't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, as well as what does Planet 42 do, just so we're familiar with you.
So my name's Kyle. As you know, I've been in HR for almost a decade. I feel old, hey? I love what I do. I'm really passionate about making a difference, and yeah, I don't think I see myself doing anything else. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I love spending time with my family, and if I'm not there, then I'm at work. So yeah, I joined Planet 42 as the head of people. We are in the car subscription industry, and we believe in giving people access to mobility. So people that probably would be neglected by a bank for whatever reason on finance, they are welcome to subscribe to a car from us, and we give them an opportunity to be mobile. So with mobility comes a lot of other things. When you're mobile, you're able to go to work, you're able to earn money, you're able to provide for your family. And that's just one example of what we do. So we've got an office in Mexico as well as in Estonia. And it's just a really fun place to be at.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us. So today's conversation is about the rise of wellness. I think we've seen the last couple of years, particularly with COVID, compounding the call out to corporates across the globe to rethink what is the new definition of wellness? How do we co-create workplaces and environments that are fully inclusive? So I love that a bit of the work that you guys do at Planet 42 is also around inclusion and what holistic financial inclusion looks like. And so that's just to set the scene in terms of the conversation we're going to have today. To kick us off and perhaps to have a better understanding from your vantage point, why do you think wellness has now become this very strong new strategic imperatives for most organizations?
I think, employee wellness has always been something that companies has always been promoting as a EVP, right? There's a lot of things around wellness, but generally organizations would then do like a wellness day. So there's a medical aid provider that's there, there's 1 or 2 things, and you do a check and then you're well, right? COVID came along and things evolved. Now it didn't become just around physical wellness, but it's holistic wellness. It's educational wellness, financial wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness. And all of these things came to rise. And organizations now are looking at this. And I like what you're saying, it's co-create. And that's what it is. Because previously, employees just relied on an organization. It's their responsibility. And now it's my responsibility as well. So it's not just Andisa's responsibility to make sure I'm well. It's what am I doing for myself? And that is why we also see there's a lot of emphasis now around financial wellness with employees, specifically because we all know COVID came, right? Many businesses struggled. Some, myself as an example, took a salary cut. And now I'm in a situation, okay, I'm reliant on an income, but that income is now significantly reduced. How do I continue paying the bills? What do I need to do? So people then started tapping into their savings, right? If they had savings at that point.
Yeah.
Then now we're sitting in a situation where people are also worried, what happens next? When's the new pandemic? So now we're in a position where we are saving for that rainy day. And funny enough, it says only 26% of working South Africans actually have some sort of savings for 3 months to help them, which is shocking.
Scary
right?
stat.
So now I think there's somewhat of I want to say responsibility for organizations to start talking about financial literacy. So it's not just about budgeting anymore. It's how do you not live paycheck to paycheck? How do you make your money work for you? And we don't, it would be great if we all were millionaires, right? But I don't think we're at that point. But how do we get to a point where we are living comfortably? And I think that's so important, because we often, hear employees saying, I'm living hand to mouth, or I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I mean, how often have we been broke 3-4 days before payday, right? And now we're phoning, hey, Chomi, can you help me with 500 Rand and, fuel and those sorts of things. And now it's come to a point where we need to start thinking smartly and making our money work for us.
You've said so much, and I really want to stay with this line of thought, and I think really peel back the layers, because as you've aptly said, COVID has really compounded and really shined a spotlight on just how difficult it is for people to live well. And to live comfortably. There's, of course, I think, the nuance of savings. And you mentioned that very interesting stat. And by and large, as South Africa, we're not considered by world standards to have a good savings culture. How can employers better, I think, encourage their employees to have that mindset of saving? Is it access to different financial instruments? Is it access to different platforms? Is it, to your point, I'm doubling down on the education piece? So how do we better teach financial literacy and make that a norm rather than an exception for when people do start making big money?
Sometimes when talking to people about savings, it becomes sensitive because they're going to say to you, well, it's because you earn a lot of money, so you don't feel it, right? And sometimes that's not the reality, okay? And I can tell you, going, and working with employees, there's the stigma that when you're in a manager position, you earn this massive amount of money and you're okay. Like, you don't need to wait for payday. I think also around this is able to have conversations that are practical with staff members. I can tell you, like, I used to sit with staff members. A simple thing around, I would ask them. So at the beginning of the year, I would say, okay, what are some of the things you want to achieve this year, right? Whether it's personal, whether it's work. And what can I do as your leader to support you in this? Okay. And, someone once said to me, they've never been on an aeroplane. They want to go to Cape Town. They've never seen the ocean. And then I said, well, why don't you? And they're like, well, you don't understand. It's too expensive. And I said, okay, but let's break it down. So then we said, okay, let's put a 8-month plan together, right? So you're going to travel in August, as an example. Let's look at flights. Let's look at accommodation. We know it's a ballpark figure of X amount. In order for you to achieve that, you need to now start saving this small bits of chunks every month to reach that goal, right? And you can use the platforms to help with that, because oftentimes, I mean, how often, and we say this to stuff like, if you look at payday, come to the office, everyone's takeaways, right? And that's a given. And that takeaway, I call it the takeaway season, lasts for at least 2 weeks until they broke again, okay? An average takeaway is between 100 Rand. If I could sacrifice one takeaway a week, I'm saving 100 Rand a week. That's 400 Rand a month. I can use that for something. I can invest it in a savings platform. Or better still, I can say to my employer, listen, you can take that money away and save it for me. So I don't even feel it. So if I don't know it, then I don't have to spend it. But it's there for my retirement or it's there for a rainy day. But also, as employers, what are we doing to help this? I mean, is financial literacy part of our induction program? Teaching them how to budget. A simple, like, we take those things for granted, but there's genuinely some people that don't know how to budget, because there's also all these hidden surprises, right?
Sure.
So giving them that opportunity, because for some people, this is their first job. Now they see a paycheck. Hey, I made it now, right? So now I got to keep up. I want to get the name brands. I want to do all of these things. But I think if organizations can come together and say, hey, listen, an example, let's partner with Floatpays. Here's a monthly contribution that you can make. This is what it looks like. This is how you access your funds. So they might feel the sort of, what do I want to go? The hurt now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm parting with, 200 rands or 500 rands. But when they see this in a savings account, when they see this growing, when they come to a point where, I've got this massive project and now I need access to this funds and I'm able to do it, then they reap the benefits of this. But it's more than just budgeting and those things. It's about coming together and creating this financial awareness, financial literacy, if I may put it that way, of saying, stop living paycheck to paycheck. And I know it's easier said than done, right? But it's how can you make the small disciplines and the small behaviors to help you be financially well.
Right. I love that you've mentioned and highlighted the importance and the role that employers can play in creating an ecosystem where people can have the opportunity to either have a paycheck-linked savings, particularly I think for those who struggle, with the discipline of having to save. And I guess for me, my question then is, how do we as HR leaders better have these conversations with other executives to highlight the plight, and I use that word intentionally, the plight of those who don't quite have that discipline muscle built into their thinking, into the psychology of money, because a lot of these decisions, for some people, they make these decisions every day, right? So it's not a once-off event when you get paid and you all of a sudden have learned the art of saving money or the art of spending wisely.
There's opportunities for us as HR to have these bold conversations with other executives, because I'm a firm believer of employees should not leave their problems at the door. Because now what happens is they bring their problem. Let's say they're having a financial issue, right? They bring their problem, they leave it at the door. Now you expect them to be productive for 8 hours. It's never going to happen, right? Because all they're thinking about is the problem they left at the door.
100%.
Right? So I would encourage us to say, let's let them bring their problems to work. Now, I'm not saying we need to start a counseling clinic or whatever the case may be, but let them have that conversation to say, hey, listen, you know what, Kyle, I'm struggling with this. This is what happened. Sometimes they may not even want the advice, but just so they could talk about it and they'll realize it on their own. Okay, maybe I need to, tap into the savings, or maybe I should have planned better. It's a learning opportunity also for them, right? And then we can be productive, because then they're giving their 110%. But it's really saying, let's have these bold conversations as HR with other people in the organization to say, if you want happy employees, you need well employees. And wellness is just not about mental health.
Right.
There's a whole,
spectrum.
it's a spectrum of things, and even things around, people are like, well, I can't afford to study. It's hard. But partnering with other organizations, because there's bursaries out there. I mean, government gives out these bursaries through the CETAs or whatever the case may be, where you can position yourself to get more skills so you can get that promotion. And that's where organizations come in. Let's focus on training and development as an example. Let's give people the opportunity for bursaries and learnerships. They get the qualification. They improve their standard of living. They can help mitigate some of these financial concerns and burdens in their families. And then you're not just changing a family, you're changing a community.
It's a society.
And that's how it filters through. And that's how we're going to hopefully one day get to a point where people, including myself, can value the opportunity of saying, I have some savings, and this is why savings are important. But it takes courage for HR to have these conversations, because if oftentimes HR is going to go and say, well, yeah, we need to do partner with the company so we can get our employees to save financially for a rainy day, and especially when we're trying to create the right discipline behavior. They're like, no, how does it benefit us?
Right.
Where does it affect our bottom line? That doesn't impact our profits. You're just coming with more admin, right? But if we are in a position where we can have those conversations and say, this is what it means to us, this is how employers can actually benefit employees. So, because again, it helps you with talent, right? It helps you to retain people. It helps you to attract people.
100%.
And people are happy in their workspace because they know, hey, listen, if something happens, and this is why Stockfells and all of those things are so important, right? But it works in a community. How do we make this adaptable in our working environment for employees to save?
Yeah. I mean, Kyle, you've highlighted so much in just that, in that response, because we really at large underestimate, I think, a couple of factors here. How from a macroeconomic perspective, it's costing the country 2% of our GDP in an unproductive, unwell workforce, right? And what that looks like for many businesses, and perhaps because we don't intently do the study and we have the data, points to fully understand just how dire the problem is. It really is just so important. You highlighted also a couple of things, and I wanna sink my teeth into some of them. The first one, of course, and I think particularly in the brown community, right? Like we know the importance of Stockfells. A lot of us are product of Stockfells in one shape, form, or the other.
My mother still does it.
My mother did it for many years. I think for a good 20 years. So I understand them fully. I appreciate the value, and I love how you positioned it as a community-based, shift and change that now is moving into the workplace, and how we can better position the importance of savings. But if we drive it from a space of communal benefit, then it is easily understood by all, by employees as well as the employers. I want to touch on you alluded to this, the rise, and I think we've seen it also the last couple of years, of payday lenders, loan sharks, otherwise, commonly known in South Africa as umashonisi, right? And how these are so crippling to the quality of people's lives. And it's easy, I think, sometimes as employers to exist so well in the privilege of our ignorance and bliss, right? And say that, well, it's not technically our problem because we pay the guys, right? And yet, the rift between people and these payday lenders continues to pose a real risk to people's wellness. What is your view on this, and how can employers tackle this very sticky subject?
I think it should be a concern for employers. 46% of employed people in South Africa actually live day to day. Meaning that whatever salary they have, 46% will break even till the next payday. Some of them don't even break even. And that's concerning, because now, and this is why I'm not a fan of those loan sharks and all of those things, is because I now need to borrow 500 Rand. I don't know what's the going rate now.
40 to 50%, depending where you are in the country.
Right. So now I have to give you, 750 Rand or 800 Rand or whatever the case may be, because I borrowed some money.
Right.
Now I'm 800 Rand short the next paycheck.
The next one.
Now I'm going to go and borrow again. So now I'm not borrowing 500 because I'm 800 short. So now I'm going to borrow 800. And then that cycle is going to continue. And eventually that's going to start affecting people. Depression, anxiety, all of those things have an impact on employers because we rely on people to get the job done.
Correct.
So we need to take those things seriously. We will be very silly if we don't actually take notice of these things, because we need to start bridging that gap as employers and help people to bridge that gap and understand why. And if we can start encouraging people to do this paycheck savings, right, it gives them an opportunity to sacrifice a little bit, but when they need it the most, they can access it. And then we don't need to go to these loan sharks where this, I want to call it the cycle of debt, is going to continue and continue. And you're never going to get out of it. It's like you're continuously digging a hole, but you're never going to get out of it. And unless you sort of pivot in your financial status, that's the only way you're going to get out of it. I mean, there was points where people were pawning in DVD players and TVs and cell phones and ID documents just so they can make it to work at month end.
Yeah.
Right? And we need to start creating that awareness to employees, because it's our responsibility as employers. It should not just be, it's a transaction, they're selling time for money. It shouldn't be that. Okay? What makes them sell their time to your organization?
Right.
That's what it should be. And we should start looking at some of those things and saying, okay, cool. How do we make them more financially aware? How do we make them more financial savvy? How do we get them just the practical element of it? Because you don't want to complicate things. When we start complicating things, then it's going to be another thing. We don't want no Forex portfolio here with all of these things at this point.
Right.
Just save a little bit and you'll see the reap of that.
Yeah. I love what you've said there. And in fact, if I could paraphrase, it really is important for employers, and I think for us as business leaders, to understand that we really do have a moral duty of care to the people that we lead and to the organizations that we serve. And I think we don't have enough conversations around that, why that's important, why true leadership is servant leadership, and how it's our responsibility to scour the market, right? And to have, frank and candid conversations around what is wellness looking like for my space. So outside of the traditional, or rather dictionary version of it, right? So if, do I really understand as a leader when my employees are financially unwell or otherwise holistically unwell, right? Like, what is that point of infliction, and can I identify it?
You struck something in me now, and I thought about it. And I'm like, what if we had to include some of these things in our culture surveys around, are you financially well? Do you know how to financial plan? Do you need assistance in financial planning? And maybe it's an awareness thing that we need to bring across, but it's we focus on culture and engagement surveys because we want to check how engaged our workforce is. But these are all interconnected into employee engagement, right? Because if I know that I'm financially stable, I'm financially okay, I'll be more engaged, right? Because then I don't need to worry about this gig economy and the side hustles and all of these things that come with
multiple streams of income and all of that stuff.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. It's important to have those things, right? Where you're having money coming in from all angles, investments and all of these things, which is great. But an average South African does not have those opportunities. So how do we get them, and us, not even them, how do we get us to live in this world where it's okay to be in that space where we are able to budget, we're able to save, we're able to live within our means? Because that's the other thing that we have, is that we've got all these influencers that are going, in and showing off, well, this is the hair that you need, and this is the shoes, and we're now going on holidays, and this is what you need to keep up with if you want to be part of society, right? So as soon as I get promoted and I'm now a manager or an exec or whatever, then I need to go and live in Bryanston because that's where the other we need to create that environment of saying, live within your means, understand where you are, but also, I don't want to go off topic, but a little bit like we talk about this generational wealth. How do we get there if we don't start small? That's why for me it's like, just when we talk to people, let's be practical. I don't like to complicate things. Let's be practical.
And you're quite right. I think it's so important that we deconstruct a lot of these societal norms, and aptly put, there's now this new spectrum of, looking wealthy while you're broke, right? And, and the internet compounds that, right? And so people, inherently feel the pressure to appear a certain way, and therefore they actually have a slightly unhealthy relationship with their money and and their understanding of how you need to make your money work, because we're all trying to keep up with the Joneses, which is I mean, I think it's a whole other topic in and of itself. I think speaking of deconstruction things, we've seen how COVID has properly highlighted that the traditional compensation models actually weren't fit for purpose, right? We saw a lot of people lose their homes, their vehicles, with job losses, and so it begs the question: are we as executive leaders thinking correctly around what compensation models look like for the modern day employee? Are they fit for purpose? Should we be rethinking what these need to look like to be considered progressive employers? What are your thoughts on this?
I think if we're not rethinking it and relooking at it, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. I think it's something that we need to continuously look at. Talking about, just to touch on your point, and you mentioned COVID, and I think everyone felt the financial impact on that. And a good few years before COVID started, I was talking to one of my leaders, Steve Ongshin, and we were talking about financial wellness and planning and all of these things. And he said to me, Kyle, it's important that we try and get staff to understand, about financial savings and investments and how do they need to keep money for a rainy day and those sorts of things. And he was like, you need, a good buffer is about 6 months of your salary in terms of savings. And I was like, there's no way, people can do this. And why would we need 6 months anyway? Like,
right.
And then COVID happened.
Lo and behold,
exactly.
COVID-19 hit.
Exactly. And then immediately I went to that conversation because then I realized, okay, this is why I need 6 months of savings, right?
Right.
But I think that we need to really look at our compensation structures. And I know a lot of companies are moving now to this annual cost to company model, and they're looking at, okay, here's your chunk of cash. This is how much we're paying you, and how you decide to
have medical aid, and
so
provident fund.
There's a word I'm looking
RA.
for. Dispensation. Is that the right word? How you dispensate?
Yes.
Is that the correct English?
I think so.
Oh, my English is right. What did they
English
say?
bundles.
The bundles are gone. Yeah. But how you stagger that is up to you. How you invest that is up to you. And I think that it's good to give the people the freedom of their cost to company, so they can decide how much is what medical aid do I want, if I even want it.
Right.
How do I want to put my provident fund? But by doing that, I also think there's a responsibility from an employer perspective to make them aware. Because it's one thing saying, hey, here's a university graduate, come, you're getting X amount. They're like, oh, wow, GTI,
right.
what. I don't think we can say that. But, I'm buying a fancy car. I need to show my friends, hey, look, I just finished university. I've arrived. And there's we need to look at that. So I think there's definitely something we can look at in terms of that. But I think that we need to look at how do we start personalizing these benefits that we give to them, so that it's not, it's something where it's not just, oh, it's cash in my pocket and this is how I'm gonna, just spend it or whatever. But how do I actually make it work for me? So how do you make your money work for you? So you work for money, great. How do you make your money work for you? And I think looking at, compensation structures that says it needs to be relooked at. We need to continuously relook at it, and give our employees the opportunity to decide for themselves, but give them the awareness, the education, the training, the knowledge, the coaching, whatever you want to call it, to say, here, we've got these platforms that you can use. You can decide. You can put in 20% of your salary in a savings. You could put 5%. But give them the opportunity, but don't just say, here's your money, do what you want with it. So I think there's a responsibility for us to relook at this compensation structures.
Yeah. And perhaps if I can play devil's advocate and think particularly for South African employers who are by and large considered to be a little paternalistic, right? And you then introduce the conversation of autonomy to employees. And I guess it begs the question, how do we strike the balance in that conversation in yes, allowing for people to rethink the disbursement of their financial, and their salaries relative to being morally responsible and trusting, right, that people will do the right thing, right? So those who say they don't prefer one medical aid provider versus another, but the outcome is that they will ensure that they are medically sound and they've got access and they're paying for the service to ensure that should something happen to them and their families, that, something's going to kick in, right? There's provision made. And I guess for me, the question for you, how are you having some of these conversations, in workplaces where you've led the people function?
I think a lot of it is around awareness. So don't let Wellness Day be a tick box exercise. Because normally it's, we're having a wellness day, come do whatever and carry on.
Yeah, check your blood pressure
exactly.
And that's it.
But creating this continuous conversations around it, whether it's partnering with institutions to come in and give talks around, financial awareness, financial budgeting, what it is like to actually do a budget. Because some people don't know how to do a budget. Talking about small things of investments, like, practical examples for them. And creating, for me, it's around creating the right environment. So creating that awareness to say, this is what it looks like. This is how you do it. This is why you do it. Remember, human beings, like we come from HR, right?
Yeah.
The biggest thing of selling something is what's in it for me.
Correct.
So if you can show employees what's in it for you if you do this, it becomes easier not to sell, because you're not selling them to be financially well.
Right.
It's their responsibility as much as it's ours, but it benefits them in the long term.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's not about selling them, but it's about, again, making them aware and saying, this is why you do it. This is how you do it. This is why you need to do it. This is the impact it's going to have on you. And I think I used that example of an employee going to Cape Town, and eventually by July, the money was saved, the tickets were bought, the accommodation was booked. And she was like, was it that easy? And I'm like, well, you tell me, because I didn't do the work, you did.
Beautiful.
So and she was able to go to Cape Town with her friends. And it was the first time she was on a plane, first time she went there, and then she came back, and then she started sharing her story with other people. Hey guys, this is how I did it. I put in 200 Rand a month. I sacrificed not buying a takeaway or not doing my nails or sitting at home instead of going out with my friends.
Yeah.
And it's, unfortunately, you're going to have to make sacrifice. It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What are you willing to lose and what are you willing to gain? And sometimes we have to trade the small things because we know it's going to help us long term.
Yeah. And it really is that balance between risk and reward,
Yes.
right? And helping people learn how to oscillate between those two things. I love that, and I love how some of these practical examples demonstrate how easy it can be.
Yes.
I think when you have the right education and the right tools,
Yes.
it actually is, demonstrates for me, I think, what is possible. And so I love hearing, anecdotal and stories like that are real life examples of when you educate people, when you give them the right tools, when you help them, map out a path, their dreams can be realized. And again, it really sits in that space of full financial inclusion.
Yes.
What does that look like? And how do we curate workplaces that embrace that, that encourage that, but also that bring it to life,
Yes.
right? By having the right quality tools for employees to now know how do I balance risk and reward.
Exactly. And talking to them about how do you manage your money,
Yeah.
because we don't have those conversations. And oftentimes HR are the ones that are then sitting with this issue with employees because now they don't know how to come to work. Hey, can you lend me 50 Rand because I don't have transport money and it's payday and all of those things, right? So an employee got promoted to a manager. And when they got promoted, they obviously got a salary increase. 3 months later, the employee comes and says, I need another increase. And we're like, why? No, cost of living has gone up. We're like, no, it's not the cost of living. It's your standard of living that's gone up. So you decided to increase your standard of living. Nothing wrong with that. But you increased it more than your means.
Right.
Right? And one of the things I said to him was, going forward now, every time you spend money, I want you to get a receipt. And behind that receipt, I want you to write down why you bought or spent that money.
Yeah.
And then we're going to sit 2 weeks later, and then let's read all those receipts.
Yeah.
And then we find actual reasons of, I actually didn't need to buy this, but I bought it. Why? What was the reason? And then he started realizing that actually I'm being, you know those tap things on those cards? It's the worst thing ever.
Yes.
Right? Because now it's easy to tap.
Yeah.
It's just ching and you're gone.
It's gone.
Right? So now it's easy. It becomes so unconscious.
Right.
Right? I'm just buying something. Tap. I'm buying something. Tap. Where before you had to put in your PIN code and the amount was there.
Yeah.
So
And you had to think.
You had to, exactly.
You had to think, and in that split second, you actually had to hold yourself accountable for the decision.
Exactly.
Because it's staring right at you.
It's in your face.
It's in your face. You can't miss it.
Exactly. So now it's easy. Tap and you move on. Sometimes how many times have we tapped?
Yeah. Without thinking.
Without even thinking. And then we're like, did it really cost us this much? Right?
Yeah.
And those are some of the things. And I made him take a receipt. And I still remember we sat down and we were going through this. And he realized how he could have he's made silly decisions with his money. And he could have not done that, And it's those things that we need to talk about. And it's not an HR responsibility.
No.
It's a business responsibility.
100%.
And if we're saying that we care for our people, if we're saying that it's people over profits, if we're saying that we want a cutting edge, high performance culture, then these are some of the things that we need to look at.
Yeah.
And these are the small steps of how we're going to get there. So taking that responsibility, or just a little bit of that responsibility as employers, and saying, this is how we're going to educate our people. This is how, and maybe we need to force them to save. So don't give them an option.
Yeah.
Part of your compensation is, this is your CTC. Great. But 5% of this, or X amount, is going into a default savings plan, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
Because how often do we hear of businesses saying medical aid is mandatory? Why do they make it mandatory?
Yeah.
Right?
Why is savings not mandatory?
Why is savings not mandatory? How are we going to change this culture?
Yeah.
How are we going to get rid of the societal norms where, we're living paycheck to paycheck, and then we still have to do other things?
Right.
Parents are investing in their children because later on the children becomes a retirement fund for the parents. And how do we break some of those things?
Yeah.
And this is, it's small things that we need to do now. We'll see the benefits later on.
Yeah. I mean, we have so much work to do, I think, as society at large, to deconstruct a lot of the thinking architecture we've been conditioned to believe, the things we've been conditioned to believe, that, you get your first big paycheck, you go on a splurge of sorts, right? And the default school of thought isn't, I must save. I must think of what the future is going to be like, right? How can I cushion myself against, the eventualities of life, right? In all its shape and form. So how do I rethink money? So I really, really love, I think, just some of the school of thought that you have. What is your school of thought around how do we unlock, the pay potential in people? So is it through systems? Is it through, different ways of thinking? We talked a lot today about, the recalibration of compensation models and how we need to rethink construct of a work pay. What does that look like? Is it a different or a slightly, nuanced cadence that we can think about in the future? So maybe just to sum up today's conversation, how do we then, really unlock, that magic of pay potential, knowing what we know, I guess through the lens of your experience as a leader? I
think, it's a journey. It's never going to be a destination. but I think it's about taking responsibility and accountability, whether as employees, as employees, as employers, as individuals, taking that responsibility and being disciplined around it and understanding why savings is important.
Yeah.
And not just savings, but why being financially well is important, right? Because it's okay to save, but then you're still not financially well. So, there's so many opportunities that we have, whether it's through government funding and opportunities or whatever the case may be, but using these avenues to build us to a point where we can be financially well and financially okay, you know? And people is like, oh, when you say you're comfortable, you're rich. It's not about that. It's about going to bed at night knowing that it's okay. Like, I have money.
Yeah.
I'm able to compensate for whatever emergencies that may come by. I have a kitty where I understand that if something happens, you know, whether it's back home, whether I need to help my parents or whatever, that it's there. And you know, it, like I'm saying, it's a journey. It's never going to happen in one go. But I think that, you know, it's the small step. And this is why I like to encourage people to do the payday savings.
Yeah.
I you know, it's when it's in your pocket, you feel it. But if it's not there, it's not there. You've never seen it. You've never noticed it.
Right.
Let it go. Right.
Right.
So I like these things where we can say to employees, hey, listen, we're doing this payday savings. This is what we're going to do. Partner with Floatpays.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. X amount of money. It goes out every month. You don't even see it. Right. So it doesn't have that, you know, that sore benefit of, or you know, that breakup of what's it, the detachment of it, right? Because you haven't seen it, so you don't know it. And then you can use that as an opportunity to increase yourself and then build yourself up from there. Because I think, you know, we want to be a nation that builds. We want to have a community that builds. We want to build a company that allows people to thrive and be better than what they were, right? And that's an opportunity for us to then say, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And these are some of the small practical elements that I think that we can do it, because again, it becomes sensitive to people, especially when you're going to say to them, oh, we need to save. Well, you don't know. I mean, we're earning minimum wage. Where are we going to save?
Right.
You know, how do we do this? So there's one part about savings, but then just being financially well, understanding where does your money go?
Yeah.
How does it get there? Why is it getting there? You know, and having those conversations. But I think about being self-aware as well, and creating opportunities. I mean, it's one thing giving them the awareness, but creating the opportunities for them is also equally as important as making them aware.
Yeah. So the tools and the enabling environment.
Yes.
Yeah. Kyle, thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom. There's so much for us to think about as it relates to inclusion, financial inclusion, financial wellness, and wellness in its entire spectrum. I am a better person because of this conversation. I think you've left me with so much to think about as a leader. And certainly for us as Floatpays, as we embark on this journey of engaging with other leaders, right? How do we give some of these conversations better sound language for us to go back into our works places and, to your point, have courageous conversations. And it really is, you know, that moral duty of care and our responsibility as leaders to actively have these conversations, to not shy away from them, to continue to build and curate workplaces that are fully inclusive, that are conscious and mindful of the people that we lead and the people that we serve. So thank you so much. Kyle, for the benefit of our audience, where can people find you on social media if they want to connect with you after and perhaps pick your brain on a few more examples that we didn't get around to chatting about today?
I'm on LinkedIn, Kyle G. Chetty. You're welcome to follow me there. I share some tips just around from an HR perspective. How do we make employee experience better? And I think my purpose is to make a difference. So I share a lot of content in there. So you're welcome to hook me up there. Or if you ever see me anywhere, you're welcome to have a conversation. Happy, there's only one of me, but I'm happy to have conversations where the time allows of how we can make our employee experience better. There's enough light for all of us to shine.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where let's talk, let's have conversations, let's share ideas, and let's help people, let's develop people, let's make a difference. I think that's important.
Amazing. Kyle, thank you so much for demonstrating what it's like to repurpose your privilege and to use the platforms that we have access to for the betterment of others. So thank you very much for coming in studio.
Thank you for the opportunity.